Your friend's victory will be yours, and your desires shall be fulfilled. With these words of encouragement, Arjuna set out in his celestial chariot, surrounded by a large host of soldiers. Bhima, the strong-willed brother, led an army to conquer the east, while Nakulus, skilled in all forms of warfare, marched towards the west. Sahadeva, with his unwavering dedication, took charge of the south. Meanwhile, King Yudhisthira remained in Kandavrasta, basking in the luxuries and surrounded by friends and relatives. As Arjuna journeyed northwards, he encountered formidable foes who dared to challenge his authority, but with his unmatched prowess and the blessings of the Brahmanas, he overcame every obstacle, claiming the north as his dominion. Lagadata, a powerful king from the east, learned of Yudhisthira's conquests and felt an unshakable sense of loyalty towards him. He sought to prove himself worthy of the Pandava brothers' respect, and asked, "What else can I do for you?" His words were laced with a deep devotion that echoed through the kingdom in this era of great change and upheaval. The Pandavas stood tall, their bond stronger than ever. As they expanded their empire, their names became synonymous with bravery, wisdom, and generosity, and at the heart of it all was King Yudhisthira, a just ruler who guided his brothers towards greatness, while maintaining the delicate balance between power and compassion. As the kingdom flourished under their rule, the people rejoiced in the knowledge that they lived under the protection of the mighty Pandavas. As Vaisampayana continued to recount the tale of Arjuna's conquests, he spoke thus. Dhananjaya, the son of Kunti, replied to Bhagadata, "If you promise to do this, I am satisfied." And having agreed to subjugate King Pradyutisha, Dhananjaya marched towards the north, guided by the Lord of Treasures. That mighty warrior Arjuna conquered the mountainous regions and their outskirts, as well as the hilly territories. He brought all the mountains and their kings under his sway, exacting tributes from them and earning their affections. He journeyed on Arjuna's drums, echoed through the land, followed by the rumble of his chariot wheels and the thunderous roar of his elephants. His next target was Vrayanta, the king of Iluka, who emerged from his city with a formidable army consisting of 4 kinds of troops. The battle between Vrayanta and Arjuna was fierce and intense, but in the end it was the son of Pandu who proved irresistible. Vrayanta, realizing he was no match for Arjuna's prowess, approached him with all his wealth, offering to surrender his kingdom. Arjuna accepted this offer, but not before exacting a promise from Vrayanta that he would remain loyal to him. With Vrayanta by his side, Arjuna then marched against Snavendu, whom he soon expelled from his kingdom. Arjuna turned his attention to Madhapur, Vemidava, Sudaman, Suzankula, the northern Ulukas, and the kings of those countries. He vanquished them all, adding their kingdoms to his growing empire. At Yudhishthira's command, however, Arjuna did not personally lead the troops against these territories, but sent his forces instead from Snavendu. Arjuna set out once more, this time against King Viswagaswa, Puru's lineage. The brave mountaineers who fought on behalf of the king were no match for Arjuna's might, and he occupied their town with the help of his troops. Having vanquished the Puru king and the robber tribes that dwelled in the mountains, Arjuna brought under his sway the 7 tribes known as Utseva Sankhitarjuna, then turned his attention to the Kshatriyas of Kashmir, defeating their brave warriors and subjugating them. He also conquered King Lahata, along with 10 minor chiefs. The Trigartas, Devravas, Kukunadas, and various other Kshatriyas attempted to resist Arjuna's advance, but were ultimately defeated. As he pressed on, Arjuna captured the delightful town of Avasarai, followed by Rakamana, who, in the majestic realm of the Pandavas, Arjuna, the son of Indra and a warrior of unyielding spirit, embarked on a grand adventure. His journey took him across the snow-capped White Mountains, where he conquered the land of Lempurasha, ruled by Dharmaputra. The clash of steel against steel resounded through the valleys as Arjuna's prowess in battle left an indelible mark on the region. With his kingdom firmly established, he marched towards Harateka, a territory governed by the Gaikas. As he entered this new realm, Arjuna employed a policy of conciliation, winning over the hearts and minds of the people. His arrival was met with wonder as he beheld the majestic Lake Masa, its crystal waters reflecting the beauty of the surrounding landscape. The rishis, revered sages who dwelled in these sacred places, were said to have blessed this land with their presence. Arjuna's conquest of Harateka was swift and decisive, as he subjugated the regions ruled by the Gandharvas that lay adjacent to the Gaikas territories. The conqueror's attention then turned towards the country of north, Haravarsha a realm rumored to be impregnable to human invasion. The frontier guards, behemoths of strength and energy, stood firm against Arjuna's advance with gallant hearts. They presented their case to the warrior, O son of Pritha, this land cannot be conquered by thee. If thou seekest thee good return hence. They warned him that anyone who entered North Haravarsha would perish, and that even with human eyes, nothing within its boundaries could be seen. Arjuna listened attentively to their words, his expression a mask of calm consideration. He replied, I desire the acquisition of the imperial dignity by Yudhishthira, the just and wise one. If your land is shut against human beings, I shall not enter it. The guards, understanding Arjuna's intentions, presented him with an alternative. They offered to pay tribute to Yudhishthira in the form of celestial cloths, ornaments, silks, and skins of divine origin. Thus, the hero among men accepted their offer and departed from north Haravarsha. His campaign had been one of numerous battles fought against both Kshatriya tribes and robbers, with Arjuna emerging victorious each time. The wealth he exacted from his conquests was vast, precious gems, jewels, horses of rare breeds, and animals of breathtaking speed. As he returned to the city of Sakraprastha, surrounded by a formidable army, Partha offered the spoils of war to Yudhishthira. The just monarch, the wealth and treasures were presented before the king, who was pleased with Arjuna's success. The hero then retired to a chamber within the palace. As Vaisambhayana began to recount the tale of Bhimasna's conquests, the air was filled with anticipation. The mighty warrior, son of Pandu, had obtained the blessing of Yudhishthira, the just king, and now marched towards the eastern direction with a formidable army at his command. Bhimasna's host was a sight to behold, a vast sea of warriors, elephants, and horses, all well armed and ready for battle. As they traversed the land, the earth trembled beneath their feet, and the very mention of their name sent shivers down the spines of their enemies. The first stop on Bhimasna's journey was the great country of the Panchalas. With a mixture of diplomacy and military might, he began to win over to this powerful tribe. His words were laced with honeyed sweetness, and his actions spoke louder than any speech. The Panchalas, sensing the invincibility of Bhimasna's army, quickly submitted to his will, with the Panchalas under his control. Bhimasna turned his attention to the Gandikas and Vihas. His valor knew no bounds. As he vanquished these tribes with ease, the Dasarnas too felt the weight of his wrath, and their king Sudharman was forced to confront Bhimasna in battle. A duel between Bhimasna and Sudharman was the spectacle to behold. The two warriors clashed in a frenzy of steel and swayed, their blows ringing out across the landscape like thunder on a stormy day. In the end, it was Bhimasna who emerged victorious. But he was so taken by Sudharman's bravery that he appointed him as the commander of his forces. With this victory behind him, Bhimasna marched eastwards, leaving a trail of vanquished foes in his wake. His next target was Rakamana, the king of Aswamedha, who stood at the head of his army like a mountain range, blocking the path to conquest. But Bhimasna was undaunted, and with a few swift strokes of his sword, he shattered the king's defenses and claimed victory. Eastern region now lay at Bhimasna's feet, its people cowed by his unyielding might. As he continued his journey southwards, he encountered Sikimara and Sumitra, kings who had not yet submitted to his will. But Bhimasna was a master of persuasion, and with a few well-chosen words, he won them over to his Sidious. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the landscape in a warm orange glow. Bhimasna's thoughts turned to Yudhishthira's next command. He had been instructed to march against Sisipala, the king of Chidai, and bring him under his control. With a deep breath, he set off towards Chidai. In the midst of a tumultuous era, the mighty Bhima, son of Pandu, embarked on a series of conquests that would leave an indelible mark on the annals of his story. His first challenge came in the form of King Srinamat, ruler of Kumara, whom he vanquished with ease. This victory was soon followed by another triumph over Vrahabala, king of Kosala. Bhima's prowess as a warrior continued to grow, and he next set his sights on Durkayana, the mighty king of Ayodhya. The battle between these two titans shook the very foundations of the earth, but in the end Bhima emerged victorious. His conquests did not stop there. He also brought under his control the country of Gopalakachat and the northern Kosalas, as well as the kingdom of Mollisas. He journeyed northwards. Bhima encountered the moist region at the foot of the Himalayas, where he soon subjugated the entire area. His exploits had now become the stuff of legend, with diverse countries falling before him like ripe fruit. Endowed with great energy and strength, Bema was unstoppable in his pursuit of conquest. Next on his list was the kingdom of Valeta, whose ruler, Sutimena, proved to be a formidable foe. However, Bema's sheer force eventually broke the king's defenses, and he was forced to surrender. This triumph was followed by another as Bema vanquished Sabha. The unyielding king of Caesius, the son of Pandu, continued his campaign of conquest. He encountered the great king Kratha, who reigned over a region near Suparsa. Bema's prowess in battle proved too much for the king, and he was eventually forced to submit. This victory marked the beginning of a long series of triumphs, as Bema went on to vanquish the Matsya, the Maladis, and the Pasiphae. Bema's conquests now took him towards the north, where he encountered a number of powerful kingdoms. He subjugated Medahara, Mahadara, and the Samadhyas with ease, and then turned his attention to the Vatsavui, which he conquered through sheer force. The ruler of the Bhargas, as well as the Nishadas and Manamet, also fell before him. As the mighty son of Kunti continued his campaign, he encountered a number of southern kingdoms that proved to be no match for his prowess. He vanquished the southern Mallas and the Baganda mountains with scarcely any effort, and then turned his attention to the Sarmakas and Varmakas, whom he defeated through policy alone. Bema's next challenge came in the form of Janaka, the powerful king of Vidas. However, this battle proved to be the sun was setting over the vast expanse of the Kuru kingdom as Sahadeva, the younger brother of Yudhishthira, prepared to embark on a grand adventure with a mighty host at his command. He marched towards the southern direction, accompanied by the blessings and affection of his elder brother. As they traversed the land, they came across the Shurasnas, who were vanquished with ease by Sahadeva's strength. The king of Matsya was next to fall under his sway, followed by Dentavikra, the mighty king of the Adhirajas. With each victory, the Kuru warrior's reputation grew, and he earned the respect of the peoples. Sahadeva then turned his attention to the country of the Matsyas, where Sukumara and Sumatra were brought under his control. The prince's intelligence and strategic thinking allowed him to conquer the Petikaras Nishadas and the high hill of Gosrina. He also subjugated Srinamat, a powerful lord of the earth. As he marched further south, Sahadeva encountered Kuntavoja, who willingly accepted his rule. The prince then moved towards the banks of the Charmanwai, where he met the son of Jamvaka, who had been defeated by Vasudeva in the past. Despite being outnumbered, Sahadeva emerged victorious and continued his conquests. The mighty warrior next vanquished the Sakas, exacting tributes from them and claiming various precious gems and wealth. He formed alliances with the vanquished tribes and marched towards the countries on the banks of the Narmada. There he defeated two heroic kings of Avantai, Vinda and Anuvinda, who were supported by a massive army. After this victory, Sahadeva turned his attention to the town of Bojikata, where a fierce battle ensued between him and King Bismeka for 2 whole days. But despite being outnumbered, the prince emerged victorious, defeating not only Bismeka, but also the king of Kosala and the ruler of the territories on the banks of the Vinwadheru, then defeated both the Natikyas and Haramviks in battle, subjugating the country of Maruha and reducing Manchagrama to submission. Sahadevas strength and strategic thinking allowed him to vanquish the mighty monarchs of the Nakshanas and Arvukas, as well as various forest kings. As he marched further south, the prince encountered King Vaitadipa, who was defeated by Sahadeva's might. The warrior then moved towards Pandria, where he fought a fierce battle with its king for 1 whole day. Emerging victorious, Sahadeva continued his conquests, marching towards the celebrated caves of Kishai, and it was there that he encountered Mainda and Dvaivada, 2 powerful monkey kings who, in the land of Kandevaprastha, a mighty army gathered around. Nakula, the son of Pandu, the earth trembled as they set out towards the west, their war cries and chariot wheels thundering through the landscape. Nakula's destination was Ravatake, a mountainous country that Kartikeya, the celestial general Asimu, held dear. As they approached, the air grew thick with anticipation. Upon entering Ravatake, Nakula's army clashed with the Matamirikas, fierce warriors who defended their land with valor. The battle raged on for days, with both sides trading blows and neither gaining the upper hand. But Nakula, driven by his unwavering determination, eventually broke through the enemy lines, claiming victory with Ravateka under his control. Nakula turned his attention to subjugating the desert lands of Sarashaka, a region teeming with life and abundance. He marched on unyielding as his army swept across the dunes, conquering every tribe that dared oppose them. The illustrious Necula's reputation grew with each triumph, striking fear into the hearts of those who had once defied him. As he ventured further west, Necula encountered Icrosa, a wise and powerful sage king. Their meeting was not without challenge, for Icrosa stood firm against the invading forces. Yet Necula's unyielding spirit and unwavering resolve proved too great to overcome. The sage king eventually submitted, acknowledging Necula's supremacy. The conquests continued unabated as Necula brought under his sway the Desarnus, Civis, Trigartus, Semetius, Malevis, Carnatus, Mad Iamachus, Vathatanus, and Mlechitrides. His army traversed mountains and valleys, leaving a trail of vanquished foes in their wake. Necula's reputation as the greatest warrior of his time spread far and wide. At last he arrived at the shore of the sea, where the Gremoniae dwelled, and the Sudras and Epirus resided. On the banks of the Saraswati, the mighty warrior conquered all who stood in his path, including those who lived by fishing, and those who inhabited the mountains. His dominion extended to the five-river country Amara, Atareotisha, Devikata, and Dwarapala. Upon completing his campaigns, Necula dispatched messengers to Vasudeva, the great king of the Yadavas. The messengers conveyed Necula's intentions. He sought to assert his authority over the lands he had conquered. Vasudeva, impressed by Necula's prowess, accepted his sway and pledged his allegiance. With Vasudeva's backing, Necula continued his journey to Sakala, the city of the Madras. There he met with Salia. In the kingdom of Hastinapura, under the wise and just rule of Yudhishthira, the people lived in harmony with their monarch. The land was fertile, and the skies poured forth abundant rain, making the cities and towns prosperous. Cattle grazed freely, agriculture flourished, and trade thrived. Even the robbers and cheats were truthful among themselves, and there were no droughts, floods, plagues, fires, or premature deaths as a result of Yudhishthira's virtuous rule. His treasury overflowed with wealth obtained through honest means. His friends and advisers urged him to celebrate a grand sacrifice, a Rajeshwya Yajna, to dedicate the accumulated wealth to the superior Brahmanas and the gods. They implored him to make arrangements without delay. Just then Krishna, the divine Prince of Dwaraka, arrived in Hastinapura with an enormous treasure. Truth, he was accompanied by his mighty army and his chariot, wheels rattling through the streets. The people rejoiced at his presence, as if a dark region had been illuminated by the sun, or a still air had been refreshed by a gentle breeze. Yudhishthira welcomed Krishna warmly and inquired about his well-being. After Krishna was seated comfortably, Yudhishthira addressed him with great respect. O Krishna, it is through your divine blessings that I have acquired this vast wealth. I wish to devote it according to the sacred ordinances to superior Brahmanas and the carriers of sacrificial libations. He requested Krishna's permission to celebrate the Rajeshwya sacrifice, either by installing himself at the yajna or having Krishna perform Ikrisha. Pleased with Yudhishthira's devotion, commended his virtues. You deserve imperial dignity, O king. Let the great sacrifice be performed by you. I shall assist in some office. For its purpose he offered to obey Yudhishthira's commands and help him achieve success. Yudhishthira was overjoyed, saying that his resolve had already been crowned with fruit thanks to Krishna's arrival. He ordered his brothers and advisers to collect materials for the sacrifice without delay. Sahadeva, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, was tasked with appointing people to gather articles necessary for the yajna as directed by the Brahmanas. The son of Satyavadhidvapayana appointed esteemed Brahmanas as sacrificial priests, while Susaman became the chanter of Vedic hymns. Yudhishthira himself took on the role of Brahma in the sacrifice, and his brothers were designated to assist him. The disciples and sons of these men were appointed hotrags, well versed in the Vedas and their branches. After completing the preparations, messengers were dispatched to invite all the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, and as the sun rose over the city of Hastinapura, the ever-victorious Necula, son of Pandu, set out to invite Ishma and Dhritarashtra to his brother Yudhishthira's grand Rajeshwya sacrifice. With a heart full of joy, Necula formally extended the invitation to the elder members of the Kuru clan, including their revered preceptor. The news of King Yudhishthira's sacrifice and spread far and wide, and soon hundreds of other Kshatriyas from various countries began to make their way to Hastinapura. They were drawn by the promise of witnessing the majesty of the Pandavas' sacrificial mansion and paying homage to their benevolent king. Among them were the Kaurava brothers, led by Duryodhana, as well as other prominent figures such as Suvalaseka Vrisheka, and Karnas, they arrived in Hastinapura. The monarchs were greeted with grandeur and ceremony. The streets were lined with Brahmanas who walked ahead of the procession, their sacred threads swaying gently in the breeze. Dhritarashtra and Bhishma, accompanied by Vihura, led the way to the sacrificial mansion, their hearts filled with joy and anticipation upon arrival. They were assigned luxurious mansions that rivaled the cliffs of Kailasa in beauty. These magnificent structures were adorned with tanks, tall trees, and every kind of furniture. Their walls were high and whitewashed, their windows covered with golden networks, and their interiors lined with rows of pearls. The floors were made of costly carpets, and the doors and entrances were wide enough to accommodate a crowd. As the monarchs rested in these opulent mansions, they caught sight of King Yudhishthira, surrounded by numerous citizens and performing sacred sacrifices. The air was filled with the sweet scent of aloes and flowers. As the sacrificial mansion came alive with activity, it seemed as though heaven itself had descended upon Hastinapura, with the gods gathered around. The Pandavas, the kings, and Brahmanas from various countries were amazed by the splendor of Yudhishthira's sacrifice. They had never seen anything like it before. The grandeur of the sacrificial mansion was matched only by the majesty of its occupant, King Yudhishthira, the just ruler who embodied the principles of Dharma. As the day wore on, the monarchs continued to arrive from far and wide, each one eager to pay homage to the Pandavas and participate in their grand sacrifice. Among them were the mighty Vrishnas, led by Rama, Anuruddha, Kanaka, and Sarana, as well as other prominent figures such as Gada, Pradyumna, and Charuvishna. The sun was setting over the vast expanse of the Kuru kingdom as Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu, made his way to the grand sacrificial hall. He had spent years preparing for this moment, and now with the blessings of his grandfather and preceptor he was ready to begin the Rajashriya sacrifices. He approached the hall. He was greeted by a sea of familiar faces: Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, Aswatthama, Sanjaya, and many others who had been appointed to various roles in the grand ceremony. Yudhishthira's eyes met theirs, and with a deep bow he addressed them all. "Help me, dear friends, in this great endeavor. This treasure that lies before us is yours to claim. Consult among yourselves, and guide me as you see fit." The assembly of esteemed guests nodded in unison, their faces aglow with excitement. Yudhishthira then proceeded to assign each of them a specific duty. The Sasana was tasked with overseeing the distribution of food and other luxuries, while Aswatthama was appointed to attend to the Brahmanas' needs. Sanjaya was entrusted with offering return worship to the kings who had come from far and wide to pay their respects. Bhishma and Drona, two wise and venerable sages, were tasked with ensuring that every aspect of the sacrifice was carried out flawlessly. Kripa, a master of gems and precious stones, was put in charge of overseeing the distribution of diamonds, gold, pearls, and other treasures, and so each member of the assembly was given a role to play in this grand spectacle. The preparations neared completion. The air was filled with the sweet scent of incense and the soft chanting of mantras. The gods themselves seemed to be present, their celestial chariots hovering above the sacrificial hall as if drawn by an unseen force. And Yudhishthira, with a heart full of devotion, began the Rajashriya sacrifice, marked by 6 fires and grand gifts to the Brahmanas. The assembly erupted into joyous cheers as the king presented them all with magnificent gifts: precious jewels, fine silks, and exotic spices. The gods themselves were pleased, their blessings manifesting in the form of clarified butter, homa, and libations poured by the great rishis. The Brahmanas too were overjoyed, their faces aglow with gratitude as they accepted the sacrificial gifts. As the sacrifice progressed, the assembly grew in size, kings from far and wide arriving to pay homage to Yudhishthira's magnificence. Each of them brought a treasure trove of wealth, gold, jewels, and precious stones that sparkled like stars in the evening light. And Yudhishthira within, in the heart of the sacred compound where the grand sacrifice was underway, the revered rishis and invited kings gathered together in the inner enclosure. Among them Narada, the illustrious sage, sat with his fellow sages, their eyes shining like stars on a clear night. The air was filled with the hum of learned discussions as they debated various topics with great passion and conviction. Some argued with well-chosen words, making the weaker position appear stronger, while others, versed in sacred texts, engaged in pleasant conversation. Narada gazed upon the sea of noble faces. His heart swelled with joy and gratitude. He beheld Yudhishthira's prosperity born from this grand sacrifice, and his eyes sparkled with delight. But as he looked deeper, a sense of awe settled within him, for in that vast assembly Narada saw not a single Sabha, or one without vows. It was as if the gods themselves had descended upon the mortal realm as the Risha pondered this wondrous sight. Memories of ancient tales, whispered to him by Brahma himself, arose in his mind. He recalled the words spoken long ago, "Be ye born on earth, and slay one another." Then returned to heaven. Narada knew that Narayana, the Supreme Lord, had taken birth among mortals as Krishna, a Kshatriya prince. This divine being with eyes like lotus beetles was said to possess unparalleled strength and prowess. As Narada's thoughts dwelled on this vision, he saw the self-create taking the way from the earth, that vast concourse of Kshatriyas, each one endued with great might. The sage's heart swelled with reverence for the Supreme Lord, who would soon take his leave from this mortal realm. With feelings of awe and trepidation, Narada sat amidst the grand assembly, surrounded by gods, brahmanas, and rishis. Just then Bhishma, the wise grandsire, stood up to address Yudhishthira. "O Bharata," he said, "let Argaya be offered unto each of these kings, for they have stayed with us for some time. Let us show them respect and honor their presence." Yudhishthira nodded in agreement, and Bhishma continued, "Whom among these ye you deem the foremost, to whom should we offer the first Argaya?" Bhishma's wise eyes scanned the assembly before him, and his heart revealed its secret as the sun shines brightest among all luminous objects. He said, "So does Krishna shine among us all." In consequence of his energy, strength, and prowess. With these words Bhishma pointed to Krishna, who sat serene amidst the gatherings. Hedava, with great devotion, presented the first Argaya unto Krishna. The Vrishnite prince accepted it graciously, following the sacred. The assembly hall was abuzz with a heated debate between King Yudhishthira and Sisapala, the ruler of Cheda. The air was thick with tension as the two leaders stood face to face, their voices raised in argument. It was a moment that would test the mettle of even the most seasoned diplomat. King Yudhishthira, his eyes flashing with concern, hastily ran after Sisapala and addressed him in a conciliatory tone. "O Lord of Earth," he said, his words dripping with sincerity, "what you have spoken is hardly becoming of one such as yourself. It is sinful and cruel to insult Bhishma, our revered elder, by suggesting that he does not know what virtue." His Sisapala's face darkened at the rebuke, but Yudhishthira pressed on, his words pouring forth like a gentle stream. "Behold, these many kings older than you are all approve of the worship offered unto Krishna. It behooves you to bear it patiently, just as they have done." But Sisapala was not one to be swayed so easily. He turned to Bhishma, his eyes blazing with defiance. "He who does not approve of the worship offered unto Krishna, the oldest one in the universe," he said, his voice dripping with scorn, "deserves neither soft words nor conciliation." Bhishma, the venerable elder, rose from his seat, his presence commanding attention. His eyes shone with a deep wisdom as he began to speak. "The chief of warriors of the Kshatriya race," he said, "who, having overcome a Kshatriya in battle and brought him under their power, sets him free, becomes the guru of the vanquished one." He paused, surveying the assembly before continuing, "I do not behold in this gathering even one ruler of men who has not been vanquished in battle by the energy of this son of the Satvata race." His eyes turned to Krishna, seated on his throne, and Bhishma's voice took on a note of reverence. "This one here of undefiled glory deserves to be worshipped not only by ourselves, but by the three worlds as well." The assembly was transfixed by Bhishma's words, his voice weaving a spell of persuasion that seemed almost impossible to resist. Sisapala, however, remained unmoved, his face set in a stubborn mask. Bhishma continued his speech, flowing like a river. "Innumerable warriors among Kshatriyas have been vanquished in battle by Krishna. The whole universe without limit is established in him of the Vrishni seas." He spoke. Bhishma's words conjured images of a vast and majestic landscape, one that stretched out to infinity. His voice wove together threads of myth and legend. In the midst of the grand sacrifice, where kings and nobles had gathered to pay homage to the divine, a momentous exchange took place. Bhishma, the mighty warrior, had concluded his words, and Sahadeva, the wise and just king, stepped forward to address the assembly. His eyes shone with devotion as he spoke of the incomparable Krishna, the slayer of Kisai, the embodiment of immeasurable energy, the gentle Yet firm, gesture Sahadeva placed his foot on the ground, a symbol of his unwavering commitment to the worship of Krishna. The air was heavy with anticipation as he invited any king who dared to question this reverence to speak up. But the mighty monarchs, the proud and wise, remained silent, their faces once aglow with confidence, now seemed pale and troubled as if in response to their unspoken doubts. A shower of flowers rained down upon Sahadeva's head, and an ethereal voice whispered words of approval. Excellent, excellent. The assembly was abuzz with the whispers and murmurs of the onlookers. Narada, the sage clad in black deerskin, stepped forward to offer his wisdom, his eyes twinkling with ancient knowledge. He spoke of the future and the past, declaring that those who refuse to worship Krishna should be regarded as dead, though they may still draw breaths out of a cognizant of the distinction between a Brahmana and a Kshatriya. Completed the ceremony honoring those who deserve reverence. But as soon as Krishna received the first worshipped Sisapala, the fierce warrior from Chita stirred up the assembly with his fiery words, his eyes blazing like copper embers. He taunted the kings, asking what they were thinking. Now that their leader was absent, the bull of Chita, Sisapala, began to conspire with the other monarchs, urging them to stand against the Vrishas and Pandavas in battle. The assembly's faces grew pale as they discussed how to obstruct the completion of the sacrifice. Their anger and self-confidence had taken hold, and they vowed to prevent Yudhishthira from performing the final sacrificial rite and worshipping Krishna. Sensing the turmoil brewing within, the monarchs understood that they were preparing for a catastrophic confrontation. The vast sea of kings with its waves of troops was about to unleash a devastating fury upon the Vrishas and Pandavas. As the assembly's anger intensified, their friends attempted to calm them down, but it seemed futile. Like roaring lions driven from their prey, their faces glowed with an unyielding ferocity. The moment of truth had arrived, and the fate of the sacrifice hung in the balance. Krishna stood at the center of the storm, his presence a beacon of peace. Amidst the gathering tempest, the question on everyone's mind was, in the midst of a vast assembly of kings, their wrath raging like a turbulent sea, whipped by fierce winds at the end of an era, Yudhishthira stood tall. The just king, versed in morality, approached his revered grandfather Bhishma, the wise and venerable grandsire of the Kurus, with a sense of urgency. Yudhishthira sought guidance on how to navigate this treacherous sea of monarchs' grandsire. He said, "This the scene of kings is churning with fury. Tell me what I should do to ensure my sacrifice remains unobstructed and my subjects are not harmed." The weight of his words hung in the air like the promise of a stormy night. Bhishma, that pillar of wisdom, gazed upon Yudhishthira with eyes that shone like stars on a clear night. "Fear not, O Teja of the Kurus," Bhishma replied, his voice steady as a mountain can a dog slay a lion. "I have discovered a way to tame this tempest. Just as dogs howl together before a sleeping lion, so too are these monarchs barking in rage before the slumbering lion of the Vrishni dynasty." Bhishma's words painted a vivid picture in Yudhishthira listened intently. "Indeed, O child," Bhishma continued, "at Yuja, the unchaining one lies dormant like a lion in its lair until he awakens. This great king Sisapala of the Cheetahs shall continue to stir up strife among these monarchs." Bhishma's words dripped with a deep understanding of the intricate web of fate that bound them all. Sisapala, that wicked-minded king of the Cheetahs, had been seeking to drag all the other kings into his vortex of darkness, but Bhishma saw through the veil of deceit and revealed the truth. Sisapala was but a pawn in a far greater game, one played by the very fabric of existence itself. Madhava, the unborn one, Bhishma declared, is the progenitor and destroyer of all living beings in the three worlds. His will is the current that guides us all. With these words, Bhishma's eyes seemed to gaze beyond the mortal realm into the very heart of the universe. As the wise grandsire finished speaking, Sisapala, that fierce king of the Cheetahs, stepped forward with a stern and rude demeanor. His voice echoed through the assembly like thunder on a summer day, challenging Bhishma's words and daring him to speak further. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom. The sun had barely risen over the assembly grounds when Sisapala, a man known for his arrogance and ignorance, stood before Bhishma, a respected elder of the Kuru clan. With a sneer on his face, he began to taunt Bhishma, saying, "Old and infamous wretch of the race art, though not ashamed of affrighting all these monarchs with these numerous false terrors." Bhishma, unfazed by Sisapala's insults,
listened calmly as the latter continued to speak. Thou art the foremost of the cuirass, and living as thou dost in the third state celibacy, it is but fit for thee that thou shouldst give such counsel that is so wide of morality. Sisipala's words dripped with venom as he accused Bhishma of being a hypocrite, one who preached virtue, but lived a life devoid of it. Sisipala then turned his attention to Krisha, the young prince who had been the subject of Bhishma's praise, arrogant and ignorant as thou art and desirous of praising. Kesava, why doth not this tongue of thine split up into 100 parts? He sneered. Sisipala mocked Bhishma for his blind devotion to Krishna, saying that even men with little intelligence could address invectives against the young prince of Bhishma. Listened patiently as Sisipala continued to speak, his words becoming increasingly bitter and sarcastic. If Krishna in his infancy slew a vulture, what is there remarkable in that he taunted her and that other feat of his, O Bhishma? Viz, in his slaughter of Aswa and Vrishabha, both of whom were unskilled in battle. But Sisipala's attack was not limited to Krishna alone. He also targeted Bhishma himself, accusing him of being a hypocrite who preached morality, but lived a life devoid of it. O Bhishma, what is there remarkable in this one's having supported for a week the govardhan mount, which is like an anthill? He sneered. While sporting on the top of a mountain, this one ate a large quantity of food. Sisipala said, his voice dripping with scorn. Bhishma listened to Sisipala's words, his expression unreadable. But as the latter continued to speak, Bhishma's patience began to wear thin. He knew that Sisipala was not just attacking him personally, but also questioning the very morality he preached. Finally, Bhishma could bear it no longer. The behavior of Bhishma is even like that of the old swan, he said, his voice trembling with anger. According to an ancient proverb, the old swan had been a hypocrite who preached virtue, but lived a life devoid of it. In the assembly hall, Sisipala stood before the gathering of monarchs, his voice dripping with disdain as he spoke of Krishna, that mighty King Jarasandha he began, who refused to fight. Krishna, calling him a slave, was worthy of my greatest esteem. His words were laced with venom, and the room fell silent as all eyes turned to Sisipala. But it was not just his words that commanded attention. It was also the tone in which he spoke, for Sisipala's voice was like a rusty gate, harsh on the ears, and his import was no less biting. He went on to say that Krishna had observed Jarasandha's strength by disguising himself as a Brahmana and entering through an improper gate, and when Jarasandha offered him water to wash his feet, Krishna had denied his Brahmanahood, feigning virtue. The assembly was abuzz with the memory of Jarasandha's death at the hands of Krishna, Emma, and Arjuna. Sisipala sneered at their actions, saying that if Krishna was indeed the Lord of the universe, he should have regarded himself as a Brahmana. The room fell silent once more, the only sound being the rustling of robes and the soft murmur of the gathering. But not everyone remained silent. Bhimasena, endued with great energy, had been listening to Sisipala's words with growing anger. His eyes, naturally large and expanding like lotus leaves, now blazed red as copper under the influence of his rage. The assembled monarchs beheld on his forehead 3 lines of wrinkles like the gang of triple currents on the triple peak mountainous. Bhimasena began to grind his teeth in rage. The monarchs beheld his face resembling that of death himself at the end of the yuga, prepared to swallow every creature. The air was thick with tension as the hero, endued with great energy of mind, was about to leap up impetuously. But Bhishma, the mighty armed grandsire of the cuirass, caught him, like Mahadeva seizing Mahasna, the celestial general Asima, with a gentle yet firm grasp. He held them back, and his words soon appeased the raging warrior's anger, like the Essene that never transgresses its continence. Even when swollen with the waters of the rainy season, them could not disobey Bhishma's words. The brave Sisipala, however, did not tremble in fear despite Bhimasena's rage. He stood tall like a lion that wrecks not a little animal in rage. The powerful king of Chita, beholding Bhima's terrible prowess in such rage, laughed and said, "Release him, O Bhishma. Let all the monarchs behold him, scorched by my prowess, like an insect." In the kingdom of Chita, a peculiar child was born to its ruler. Sisipala, as he came to be known, was a being unlike any other. He had 3 eyes and 4 arms, and from the moment he took his first breath, he let out a blood-curdling scream that sent shivers down the spines of his parents and their courtiers. The king and queen were beside themselves with anxiety, and they feared for the child's fate.
But just as they were about to abandon him, an unseen voice spoke up, assuring them that Sizipala was destined for greatness. The voice prophesied that despite his fearsome appearance, the child would grow strong and fortunate, and that he would not meet his demise in childhood. The queen, still reeling from the ominous signs surrounding her son's birth, begged the invisible being to reveal more about the child's future. She asked who would be responsible for Sizipala's eventual death, and was met with a cryptic response: he upon whose let this child being placed, the superfluous arms of his will fall down upon the ground like a pair of five-headed snakes, and at the sight of whom his third eye on the forehead will disappear will be his slayer. The prophecy sent shockwaves throughout the kingdom, and soon kings from all over the land flocked to Chita to catch a glimpse of the extraordinary child. The king, eager to please his visitors, offered Sizipala's lap to each monarch in turn. But no matter who held him, nothing out of the ordinary occurred. It was only when the mighty Yadeva, Harosan, Karshana, and Janardana arrived at Chita that the prophecy began to unfold. As they sat with their relatives, including the queen, Sizipala's third eye and extra arms remained intact until he was placed on the lap of Krisha, the god king from Dwaravatai. In an instant his superfluous limbs fell to the ground, and his third eye vanished. The queen, overcome with fear, begged Krishna for a boon. She implored him to pardon her son's future transgressions. Moved by her plea, Krisha agreed to forgive Sizipala up to offenses on condition that he would not be slain until he had committed them. The queen was relieved, but little did she know that one day her son's wickedness would lead him to summon the mighty Bhima to battle years. Later, as Bhishma recounted this tale to Bhima himself, it became clear that Sizipala's fate was sealed. Despite Krisha's promise of forgiveness, the wicked king would eventually earn his own downfall, and it would be at the hands of none other than Bhima, who stood as a formidable warrior in the service of the Yadevas. The sun was setting over the vast expanse of the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled kings. Bhishma, the revered grandsire of the Kura, stood tall, his eyes gleaming with wisdom as he addressed the ruler of Chita. King Bhishma said, "The will that summons me to fight is not yours alone, but rather a command from Krisha himself, the Lord of the universe. You see, I am no ordinary warrior, for I possess strength that knows no deterioration, and yet you dare to summon me as if I were some common soldier." The ruler of Chita's face turned red with rage as he retorted, "Let our foes be ended with Krisha's prowess. If your mind delights in praising others, then praise Darada, the ruler of Valhika, who rent this earth as soon as he was born. Praise Karna, the mighty warrior who vanquished Jarasandha and tore him apart like a lion, devouring its prey." Bhishma listened patiently to the king's words, his expression unchanging. But when the ruler of Chita continued to boast about other kings, Bhishma's patience wore thin. "But why do you not praise Drona and Aswathaman, who are mighty warriors worthy of praise, or Duryodhana, that mighty armed king of kings who is unequaled in all the earth?" Bhishma asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "No, instead you sing the praises of Kansa's coward son Krisha, as if he were some divine being worthy of worship." The ruler of Chita's words grew more venomous, accusing Bhishma of living at the pleasure of these kings and speaking like a bird that picks food from a lion's mouth. But Bhishma stood firm, his eyes flashing with defiance. "Truly, I am alive at their pleasure," he said, "but I regard them as not equal to even a straw, and if you wish for speedy death, summon Govinda, the wielder of the discus and the master battle. Let him who wishes for swift annihilation face Madhava." The lord of all the assembled kings erupted into a cacophony of anger and outrage, their words cutting at Bhishma like daggers. But he stood tall, his voice unwavering, as he faced the storm of criticism as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in darkness. Bhishma's words hung in the air, a challenge to all who would dare to oppose him. The grandsire of the Kuras had spoken, and his words would be remembered for ages to come. In the midst of a grand assembly, the mighty king Sizipala, son of Damahosha, stood tall, his eyes blazing with defiance. He had long been an enemy of Krisha, the slayer of Madhu, and now he had come to challenge him in battle. "I will fight you, Krisha," Sizipala declared, "and I will defeat you today along with all the Pandavas. They have worshipped you as a king, but you are nothing more than a slave and a wretch." The assembly fell silent, awaiting the response of Krishna. Krishna, serene and calm, spoke softly to the kings present. He reminded them that Sizipala had long been a thorn in his side, burning Dwaraka. When he thought Krisha was away, stealing the sacrificial horse mean for his father's sacrifice, and even ravishing the wife of Akrura on her way to the Savar's country. This wretch has committed many crimes against me, Krishna said, and now I will put an end to him in your presence. The kings, moved by Krishna's words, began to reprove Sisupala for his actions. But Sisupala undeterred lied and spoke in his own defense. He claimed that he had only ever sought to test Krishna's strength, and that the slayer of Madhu was not worthy of being worshipped as a king. Pardon me, if you will. Sisupala said, but what can you do to me, O Krishna? Krishna, his mind made up, thought of his discus, the mighty Sudarshan Chakra that had humbled the pride of the Asuras. He grasped it in his hand and spoke to the assembly. This man has committed 100 offenses against me, and now his number is full. I will slay him before you all. With those words, Krishna hurled his discus at Sisupala, striking him with deadly precision. The mighty king fell to the ground like a cliff. Struck by thunder, his body was rent asunder, and from it emerged a fierce energy that adored Krishna and entered his body. The assembly gasped in awe, for they had never seen anything like this before. The sky had darkened, and showers of rain poured down, accompanied by blasts of thunder. The kings present were stunned into silence, some rubbing their palms in rage, others biting their lips with anger. But amidst the chaos, a strange calm settled over Krishna. He stood tall, his eyes shining with compassion as he regarded the energy that had entered him. As the assembly slowly returned to its senses, they beheld a sight of wonder. Krishna, now possessed of the energy of Sisupala, shone like the sun in all his glory. The great rishis and brahmanas praised Kesava, their hearts filled. In the aftermath of completing the Rajeshriya sacrifice, a momentous occasion that had brought great fortune to the Pandavas, Vesa, the revered sage and grandfather of Yudhishthira, arrived at the court. The king, surrounded by his brothers, rose from his seat to pay homage to the venerable Rishi, offering him water for his feet and a seat on a golden elay. Karpavisa, seated comfortably, began to speak in his trademark truthful tone. O son of Kunti, you have risen through good fortune, having achieved imperial sway that is difficult to acquire. Your prosperity has brought success to all the Kauravas. He then expressed his desire to depart with their leave, which was granted by Yudhishthira. However, before leaving, Vesa shared a cryptic message that would haunt the king for days to come. O king of kings, he said, for 13 years. Those portents will bear mighty consequences, ending in destruction, making you the sole cause. The assembled Kshatriyas of the world will be destroyed. O Bharata, through the might of Bhima and Arjuna, you will behold a dream where the blue-throated Balva, the slayer of Tripura, drinks from a human skull farce. And terribly Yudhishthira was perplexed by these words. But Vesa reassured him that none could rise above the influence of time. The wise Rishi then bid farewell to the king, accompanied by his disciples, and set off towards Kailasa mountain. As soon as Vesa departed, Yudhishthira became consumed with anxiety and grief. He began to ponder the meaning behind the Rishi's words, wondering if there was any way to ward off the fates through their own efforts. The king then shared his thoughts with his brothers, revealing that he had made a vow for 13 years. He would speak no harsh words to anyone living under the command of his relatives, then exemplifying Virchurjana, ever the voice of reason, caution Yudhishthira against succumbing to despair. The king's resolve was firm, however, and he convinced his brothers that this vow would bring peace and harmony to their kingdom. With a newfound sense of purpose, the Pandavas pledged to uphold their brothers' promises. The monarchs departed from the court. Yudhishthira and his brothers performed auspicious rites and entered their palace, accompanied by their ministers. Meanwhile, Duryodhana and Sekanai continued to dwell in the assembly house, unaware of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. The stage was set for a great battle, one that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom and lead to the downfall of the Kauravas. The prophecy of Vesa had been spoken, and its consequences were now inevitable. In the grand assembly house of the Pandavas, Duryodhana, a man of great pride and ambition, dwelled amidst his enemies. He ruined the halls, accompanied by Sekanai, his cunning uncle, who had been secretly plotting against the Pandavas for years. As they explored the mansion, Duryodhana's eyes widened with wonder at the celestial designs adorning its walls. But in his haste and ignorance, he mistook a crystal surface for a pool of water and drew up his clothes, only to realize his mistake afterwards. The humiliation was compounded when he fell into a lake of crystal water adorned with lotus flowers. Thinking it was solid ground, the mighty Tema and the other Pandavas couldn't help but burst out laughing at Duryodhana's misadventures. But the prince, unused to being mocked, hid his emotions behind a mask of indifference. However, he couldn't bear the repeated laughter of the Pandavas as they watched him struggle to navigate the mansion and day while trying to cross what he thought was dry land. Duryodhana's head struck against a crystal door, leaving him dazed and reeling. Later, he attempted to open another door that was actually open, only to tumble down in embarrassment. The prince was continued as he mistook closed doors for open ones, stumbling from one mishap to the next as Duryodhana departed from the assembly house with the leave of the Pandavas. His heart seethed with jealousy and resentment. He beheld the grandeur of Yudhishthira's Rajeshwya sacrifice and the prosperity that surrounded the Pandavas. His own city of Hastinapur seemed dull in comparison. The king's heart was consumed by a burning fire of jealousy. As he reflected on all he had seen and suffered, he couldn't bear to see his enemies thriving while he languished in darkness. In his anguish, Duryodhana thought of nothing but the assembly house and Yudhishthira's unrivaled prosperity. As he journeyed back to Hastinapur with Sekanai by his side, Duryodhana's mind was preoccupied with thoughts of self-destruction. He spoke little to his uncle, who noticed his absent-mindedness and asked him why he seemed so troubled. Duryodhana's response was laced with venom as he revealed the depth of his jealousy and resentment towards the Pandavas. "I am but a shallow tank in the summer season," he said, "dried up by the fire of their prosperity. I see no way to acquire such royal wealth. My efforts are for naught. Fate is supreme, and I am but a mere mortal." Duryodhana's words were laced with despair as he confessed his inability to bear the thought of his enemies' prosperity, while his own kingdom decayed. He implored Sekanai to speak to their father.
The sun beat down on the bustling streets of Hastinapur as Sekanai, a cunning and skilled advisor, approached Duryodhana, the eldest son of King Dhritarashtra. Sekanai's eyes gleamed with a hint of mischief as he began to speak, his words dripping with persuasion. "Duryodhana, my prince," Sekanai said, his voice low and smooth, "you should not be jealous of Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu. The sons of Pandu have been blessed with good fortune, and they have earned their place in the kingdom through their own merits. They have obtained Drupada as their wife, Drupada and his sons as allies in Vasudevana. The mighty warrior has pledged to help them conquer the world." Duryodhana's face darkened at the mention of Yudhishthira's successes. He had always felt a sense of insecurity, knowing that his brothers were more skilled in battle and more favored by their father. Sekanai sensed Duryodhana's frustration and pounced on it. "A slayer of foes," Sekanai continued, "you have tried to destroy the Pandavas through countless plans, but they have escaped every time due to sheer luck. However, I know a way to vanquish Yudhishthira without risking your allies or other great warriors." Duryodhana's eyes lit up with hope as he leaned forward, his voice filled with excitement. "Sekanai, tell me, is there any way for me to defeat him?" he asked eagerly. Sekanai smelled a sly glint in his eye. "The son of Kuntai is fond of display, although he does not know how to play well. If you ask him to play, I am confident that he will not refuse, and I, Sekanai, am the greatest displayer on earth, unmatched even by the gods." Duryodhana's face lit up with a plan, and he nodded enthusiastically. "Go, Sekanai," he said, "represent this idea to my father Dhritarashtra. Win his kingdom and his prosperity for me through your skill at this." Sekanai bowed low, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "I will do as you command, O king," he said. "I will represent this plan to Dhritarashtra, and I have no doubt that I will emerge victorious, winning Yudhishthira's kingdom for you without a fight."
In the grand assembly hall, Vasapayana began to recount a tale that would shake the very foundations of the royal family. He spoke of King Yudhishthira's majestic Rajeshwya sacrifice, which had left an indelible mark on the hearts of all who witnessed it. As the news of the sacrifice spread, Sekanai, son of Savala, approached Dhritarashtra, who sat on his throne, his eyes dimmed by time. With a hint of concern in his voice, Sekanai said, "Great king, I have come to inform you that Duryodhana has been consumed by jealousy and anxiety. His color has faded, and he appears emaciated and depressed." Dhritarashtra's expression turned curious, and he asked Duryodhana to reveal the source of his distress. Duryodhana began to speak, his words pouring out like a river in full flood. "Father, I am tormented by the prosperity of Yudhishthira. His wealth is boundless, and his generosity knows no limits. He feeds thousands of Brahmanas, each one receiving 30 slave girls as their daily sustenance. The kings of the earth bring him tribute in the form of jewels, gems and exotic animals as Duryodhana spoke his words, became laced with envy and a deep-seated resentment. I see Yudhishthira's wealth before me, even though it is not mine to possess. I am consumed by jealousy, and my heart burns with every passing day. His voice cracked with emotion as he continued, "Behold, Father, the palatial compound of the Pandavas, filled with innumerable monarchs who have come to witness Yudhishthira's sacrifice. The kings bring their wealth, and they become like Vaisyas distributing food to the Brahmanas." And I listened intently to Duryodhana's words, his eyes gleaming with a hint of mischief. He spoke in a voice that was both soothing and persuasive. "Hear me, O Duryodhana, and I shall reveal to you the secret of Yudhishthira's prosperity. I am an adept at this, superior to all in the world. I can predict the outcome of every throw and when to stake, and when not summoned to play or battle. He will come forward, and I promise to win his wealth." For you, Duryodhana's eyes lit up with excitement as Sakanai spoke, and he turned to Dhritarashtra with a resolute expression. "Father, grant permission to Sakanai to engage in this game of death. Let him play against Yudhishthira, and I shall enjoy the wealth that is rightfully mine." Dhritarashtra, moved by Duryodhana's words, decided to consult with his wise minister Chatta. The sun was setting over Hastinapura as Janamejaya, the wise and just king, sat with his sage Santai in the grand hall of the palace. The air was thick with anticipation as Janamejaya asked Santai to recount the tale of the fateful game at this that had brought sorrow upon his ancestors. The Pandava Santai nodded, and Vaisapayana, a revered sage and disciple of Vasa, began to narrate the story. It was in the great assembly hall of Hastinapura, he said, where Dhritarashtra, the king, had called upon his son Duryodhana to speak with him in private. Dhritarashtra's words were laced with concern and wisdom as he advised Duryodhana against engaging in this game's. "Vidura does not approve of it," he said. "He is a sage who knows the secrets of the universe, and his counsel is always beneficial for us." Dhritarashtra continued to reason with Duryodhana, explaining that the pursuit of wealth through this was a path that led only to ruin. But Duryodhana's heart was already consumed by envy and resentment. He had grown up watching the Pandavas thrive under Yudhishthira's leadership, their kingdom prospering as they received tribute from across the land. The thought of his own family's wealth and power being eclipsed by that of their enemies filled him with a burning jealousy. "I am a wretched man," Duryodhana confessed to Dhritarashtra. "I see the prosperity of our foes, and it pains me deeply." He recounted the many instances where he had been humiliated by the Pandavas, from mistaking a crystal lake for water to being laughed at by them. And Arjuna, as Vaisapayana spoke, Janamejaya listened intently, his heart heavy with sorrow. He knew that this tale of woe was not just the story of the past, but a warning of the dangers of unchecked ambition and greed. The fate of Duryodhana's family, as well as that of their enemies, hung precariously in the balance like a delicate lotus flower swaying in the breeze. At his assembly hall grew silent as Vaisapayana finished his tale. Janamejaya's eyes were filled with tears as he gazed upon the faces of those gathered before him. The story of the disc game had brought home a painful truth, that the pursuit of power and wealth can lead even the noblest of souls down a path of destruction, leaving in its wake only sorrow and regret.
The sun had barely risen over Hastinapura when Duryodhana, the eldest son of Dhritarashtra, made his way to the palace of Yudhishthira. The just king, his heart was heavy with envy as he beheld the grandeur that surrounded him. The streets were filled with people from all corners of the world, each bearing gifts for the illustrious Pandavas. Duryodhana walked through the crowded gate. He saw kings and queens, Brahmins and Sudras, all gathered to pay their respects to Yudhishthira. They had brought with them an array of treasure skins of the finest quality, blankets made from the softest wool, and garments woven with threads of gold. Duryodhana's eyes widened as he saw the king of Cambodia present 300 horses, each one a marvel of speed and strength. But it was not just the animals that caught his attention. The Brahmins who had been tasked with rearing cattle for Yudhishthira's kingdom stood patiently at the gate, their golden kamandalas filled with clarified butter. They too had brought gifts, hundreds of thousands of serving girls from the Karpasak country, each one a vision of beauty and elegance. Duryodhana continued his tour of the palace grounds. He saw more wonders unfold before him. The Varmas, Parandas, Tungas, and Kitavas, all tribes from far-off lands,
had gathered to pay their respects to Yudhishthira. They brought with them goats kindness as camels, vegetables, honey, blankets, jewels, and gems of every kind. Among the crowds was Vagadatta, the brave ruler of Prajotisha, who stood at the gate with a considerable tribute comprising horses of the finest breed. But even he was refused permission to enter, forced to leave behind his gifts, swords with ivory handles adorned with diamonds and gems. Duryodhana watched as more kings and queens arrived, each one bearing their own unique treasures. The people from Valaka presented 10,000 dishes trained to run 200 miles a day. They also brought blankets of woolen texture, skins of the rank deer, clothes made from jute, and garments woven with thread spun by insects. As the day wore on, Duryodhana's envy grew.